Hello everybody. This game from round 8 of the FIDE Grand Prix tournament in Mallorca. This position is from Grandmaster Jon Ludwig Hammer with the white pieces versus GM Alexander Riazantsev with the black pieces. Now Riazantsev has been having a rough couple of rounds, and it looks like in this position with the black pieces that he is on his way to possibly a third defeat here. And in an amazing display of calculation and skill, these players battle. Now here in this position, Hammer has just played the move Rook takes F6, which going and taking the knight and going into the Rook ending. You can see he has 4 pawns to Black's 2, but his pawns in the F file are doubled, and his C pawn is attacked. But it still looks like he should be winning. Black's major asset in this position is that D4 pawn, but White's king is right on F2, so it still looks like White should be winning. So we're going to look at this and see what actually took place. So fasten your seatbelts. Excuse me. All right, so here Jon Ludwig Hammer plays Rook takes F6 check. Riazantsev King G7. And now the move Rook takes A3, which is a natural move here. All right, so Rook C6, natural move, just protecting this pawn. After all, this seems like if one of these white pawns is gonna make it, it looks like it's the C pawn, so it's a normal looking move. Another idea was just to simply play Rook D6. Okay, now the Rook D6 looks counterintuitive because of simple Rook takes C4. All right, and say play can go King F3, King F7, King E4, and let's say D3 check, King E3, D2, and Rook takes D2. So it's just a temporary pawn sacrifice to try to gain an advantage. And then you got these pawns versus this one right here. But again, you might as well look at these F pawns as just a single F and H pawn. All right, that almost sounds like you're cursing. You'd be like a F and H pawn. But yes. So this looks like it'd be very difficult to win. Also, I mean, this is table-based area right here. So we can't blame White for making logical-looking moves here. That looks very logical because this pawn looks like it has the most promise. So Rook takes H3. C5. Now Rook H2 check. Now here's another interesting point. Now Rook H2 check is played to escort this pawn down, but with this pawn on D4, Black has the chance to go back to the C file. So for instance, Rook C2 just getting right behind the pawn, and play could go again. For example, King E2, and now you push the H pawn. All right, creating distraction for White. And this pawn right here is in a lovely position because it anchors the Rook. Say Rook G6, King F7, C6. And this is a draw because this pawn can't move any further, and it's hard for White to. Does White make any progress without giving up one of these pawns? For example, H4, Rook H6, H3. Eventually, this Rook is going to have to snatch this pawn, and this Rook will get this pawn. The King is in perfect position to defend here. So let's say C7, King G7, Rook takes, and this is going to be a draw. Let's go back to the main line. So that was an option instead of D3. I think Rook C3 might have been just more to the point. So, excuse me, instead of Rook H2, rook c3 would have been more to the point. So after king f3, now d3, king e4 attacking the pawn. Now d2. Things get kind of dangerous here. Now, of course, this pawn is threatening the queen, so rook d6 is forced and makes the way for this pawn to go and become a queen. h5, again, that's all black has is this asset. He must create some kind of counter threats. Check. And I mean, I had thought white was winning after c7, but it's more complicated than that. This is what was played during the game is f7, and I had looked at c7 with without any engine or anything, and I thought this was winning. But then I calculated further, and the line I saw was this as follows. And I'll give it to you as I saw it, so it might, if there's an error in it, it's because I was just glancing. But anyway, it was basically c7. D1 queen is forced. Rook takes. Rook c2, stopping this pawn. And king e5. Rook takes c7. Rook g1 check. King h6. And king e6. With this idea of promoting this pawn. That's kind of as far as I looked at, and I said, okay, white is winning. But it is possible, though, after rook here to g1, that maybe king f7, but again, yeah, exactly. So my initial calculations seem correct. Yeah, he can't go there because of this. Because when I first looked at it, I saw the f pawn queening. So rook g1, this forces the king to the h file, and if black can draw here, it's going to be because of this pawn. So let's try to figure out just a little bit more. So rook, king h6, and let's just say here, and if he tries to protect this pawn, f5, rook b, a7, king e6. And right here is going to be a draw also if you try to push too early because the rook will sacrifice itself. So rook takes, and then this king will come out and escort this pawn. So king g4, king e7, king g3, and the king is too far away basically to stop this pawn, so the rook will have to give itself up. So that's a draw. So back to the main line. f7 was played, so c7 was a serious consideration, but again, I'm not exactly sure about it. I'll have to see, maybe engine, or it just take more time, because the game just finished, and I was kind of just looking at it real quick, but I found it very interesting. King f4, rook takes c7. See, in here, again, it looks like black is holding. So here, Hammer, I like saying his name, Hammer. Reminds me of like Thor, Hammer. So king g6 and f7 was played during the game. So again, a critical line is c7. This is what actually was played. So f7, king takes f7. So driving the king back. d1. Rook takes d1 force. Rook c2. So we see analogous ideas. Rook d7, driving the king back. And this is the why white sacrificed this pawn to get this king back here. Okay, and try to get a winning king and pawn endgame right here, or winning rook king and pawn endgame. Rook c7, king d8, rook takes c6, and now this is the critical position right here. And unfortunately for white, uh, unfortunately for white, um, black, and this is a study like a study type position, but black draws here because he has a ready made Philidor defense position. So this position right here, ladies and gentlemen, is a dead draw. If you're not familiar with the Philidor position, um, you should study that. That's a great defensive position. That's the key position, and then off of that, you'll understand like the similar positions. But right here, the king cannot cross the sixth rank right now. Okay, so it's blocked, and what happens is once the king, as long as the king is in front of the pawn, um, the black blocks the king from crossing over the sixth rank. But once the pawn is maneuvered in front of the king, right, and say the king is on e5 and the pawn is just moved to f6, then what black does is start checking from the back when white is vulnerable. So in other words, the white rook will come all the way down here and come behind and start checking white. So let's see how the rest of this game went, and maybe there's some of these elements show up. Maybe they didn't draw too soon. So king e7, and you can draw staying on. You can stay on the back rank too. You don't even the king can stay. The king could stay right here. It doesn't even matter. King g5. You see how black or Zantsev is just waiting. He already knows it's a draw. White knows it too, but you got to test your opponent a little bit to make sure he knows. The pawn moves. See how he's just maintaining the defense here? Check. It doesn't matter. Like I said, the king could just be on the back rank. And now this makes the draw even easier. If he kept the rooks on the board, he could have made it, it's still a draw, but the fact that he traded rooks means that basically he gave up on the position. But anyway, the idea is say after rook b7, let's say rook c6, and let's say now the pawn moves to the sixth rank. Okay, now the action on the rank is blocked. So now black has to be careful because the next move is gonna be king here, and now you got all kind of checkmate threats and stuff like that. But not to worry, because now black goes to the first rank and starts checking from the back. So let's just make a exaggerated move there. Check, check, and it's just all day. You just check, check, check. And that's the essence of the Philidor's defense. So this is why Hammer didn't push this pawn, because he already knows the rook's coming down there and then that. So basically this is tantamount to a handshake. He plays rook h6, and rook takes rook. Now that would have been an error to do that, because now he just gave up the sixth rank. So say like rook b6 would have happened, and now the rook is forced to come back to the seventh rank. It doesn't work. As for instance, king g1, you just play that, threatening mate. Then you then white is winning. Set up the lieutenant position, which I'm sure all of you know out there. So after this, now we're in a different realm, and this is where you have to understand opposition and understand about key squares. And I have a video on key squares if you don't know what that is. But this, of course, is a dead draw. So after king h6, You just simply play that, okay? Because you have to know what the key squares are. For instance, in this position, these are the key squares. Let me mark these too. These are the key squares. What do I mean by key squares? And I have a video, and this is what I mean by key squares. What this means is that if this king um, right here can occupy any of those boxes marked in red, that means he can promote that pawn by force. That's exactly what that means. So you have to understand that so you can make the right moves. So for example, if you're in time pressure and you lose your bearing and do something silly like that, then you're gonna lose because white will then enter one of the key squares, and then you can't stop this pawn from promoting. You know, of course, I gave you an exaggerated example, but I've seen it many times, and usually in time pressure, because in time pressure, when you're just on instinct, you're just moving and moving and moving. If you don't have these principles drilled in you, you'll make a move like that and then just lose. So understanding right off the bat that white has to get to this square, Riazantsev, oops, back to the right position. Knowing this is a key square, Riazantsev plays this move right here. Stops him from getting there. Right? So it's a little more testing going on. And he just goes back. Okay? You got to be very careful. Like for instance, if he did that, he would lose. Remember, these are the key squares. And now why would black be lost here? Because of king f6. After king f6, black loses the opposition and he's forced to move one way or the other. If he goes here, you gain a key square. If he goes here, you gain a key square. This is why black would be lost. So there's a little cat and mouse game going on. Of course, black makes sure to maintain the opposition. Okay, now with the advance of the pawn, the squares, the opposition, I'm sorry, with the pawn advance, the key squares move forward. So now the key squares are just here. This makes the defense easier for black. He just simply goes there. And there's no way that white is going to be able to control any of these squares. He does that, and then you just simply keep the opposition. Again, if you do something dumb, like that, then white can gain control of the key squares. And that's really what it's about. So of course, black just stays in front. The oldest trick in the book, king g8, and then there's the stalemate as black cannot go out. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. Exciting game that ended in a draw, and I appreciate your feedback and comments. Please like and subscribe and all that good stuff, and I'll see you on the next video.